The U.S. is preparing for the possibility of a Russian attack on Ukraine with little or no warning.
Pentagon spokesman John Kirby says Russian President Vladimir Putin continues to increase troop levels near the border. But Kirby also says he does not believe Russia has made a final call on invading Ukraine.
Meanwhile, Washington is moving embassy operations west from the Ukrainian capital of Kyiv to a city near the Polish border. But officials say there is no specific threat to the U.S. embassy at this time.
The White House maintains that diplomacy is still on the table as President Biden speaks furiously with allies and with his counterpart in Russia.
The path for diplomacy remains available if Russia chooses to engage constructively. However, we are clear-eyed about the prospects of that given the steps Russia is taking on the ground in plain sight.
For the latest, let's bring in CBS News national security correspondent David Martin. He's at the Pentagon. So, David, you have some new reporting on Russia's weaponry. What is the latest on the buildup and reports of increased Russian mercenaries on the ground?
Well, for weeks, we've been looking at these commercial satellite photos which show Russian vehicles parked bumper to bumper in these assembly areas. Now those vehicles, or at least some of those vehicles, have started to move out of those assembly areas up toward Ukraine's northern border and into attack position. That doesn't mean they're going to attack, but it does mean that they are more ready to attack today than they were yesterday. Now, U.S. officials have been warning that Russia is likely to create a pretext for invading, an act of sabotage that they could blame on the Ukrainians and say that it threatened the lives of Russian citizens and therefore it had to go into Ukraine to protect Russian citizens. And that's, of course, exactly the kind of deniable operation that could be undertaken by mercenaries. So one of the first signs, I think, that Vladimir Putin really has made a decision to go in would be some sort of explosion which kills people or which causes significant damage that would then be blamed on the Ukrainians. And, you know, that could happen at any time. Tomorrow, the Ukrainian military is scheduled to hold exercises up near its northern border. So maybe that will be the occasion for one of these pretexts.
A horrific thing to watch and wait for, David. You know, the National Security Advisor, Jake Sullivan, spent the weekend warning that any invasion would likely start with an aerial bombing campaign that could indiscriminately kill civilians. What is it that leads U.S. officials to believe that that could be Putin's strategy?
Well, the U.S. all along has had intelligence on not just what they see with this buildup, but what they hear. Their monitoring of Russian communications and planning by the Russian general staff for how they're going to do this. And some of that intelligence includes basically what the U.S. would do if it were invading Ukraine, which is to take out the command and control of the government, which, of course, much of it is located in the capital of Kyiv. And you take out command and control two ways. You either do it with cyber attacks or you do it with airstrikes. So airstrikes would be a part of an all-out invasion plan.
Well, David, we touched on this a moment ago. What is happening on the ground at the U.S. Embassy in Kyiv?
Well, the U.S. Embassy in Kyiv is being evacuated to the west to a city called Lviv, which is less than 50 miles from the border with Poland. So that leaves them a quick exit out of the country if an invasion begins. Also, the 82nd Airborne, which was sent to Poland one of its missions is to set up receiving stations for Americans crossing the border from Ukraine into Poland. They were scheduled to set up 3 receiving stations, which would be capable of handling 5,000 people coming across the border all at once. But I talked to people over there this morning, and as of this morning, fewer than 100 American citizens, people living in Ukraine as American citizens, had crossed into Poland, and they've only set up one of those 3 receiving stations because right now there's not a need for the other 2. Now, as the situation continues to escalate, Americans living in Ukraine may finally heed some of these warnings that the administration has been giving, and those numbers could increase dramatically in the coming days.
All right, continuing to watch and wait to see what happens. David Martin at the Pentagon. David, thank you.